Oh my goodness, I am so excited for MOMcon, aren't you guys? Holy cow, it's here, finally. So hey, how are you guys doing? If you have read in this book at all, you'll know that I talk about my family a little bit. I talk about my mom. She's actually here tonight. It's pretty awesome when you're in your 30s and your mom shows up at your extracurricular activities to cheer you on. So thanks, Mom. I also talk about my brother. His name is Charlie. And I'm going to move my hair because we're having a little mic thing. And a couple weekends ago, is that it? I'm breathing. I'll try to hold my breath while we do this. Thank you. Okay, am I good? Can you guys hear me? Okay, so a couple weekends ago, I got to fly to San Diego to visit my brother Charlie and my sister-in-law Lacey. They are having their first baby, and you guys, I am so excited to be an auntie. I can hardly contain myself. They're due in November, and so we had a baby shower a couple weekends ago. And the second day I was there, Lacey and I were sitting in the backyard, and she was telling me all about her birthing plan. And so, yeah, we all know what that means, right? So she's telling me about how she's not planning on using any pain medication. And so she's been practicing these breathing techniques to help her get through. And so my brother imitated her whole breathing repertoire and had us in hysterics. And then she told us about how she's going to hire a doula to help her through the labor process. Yes, fantastic, right? But you guys, in my head, I'm trying to be a really good sister-in-law. And I know that when you're 7 months pregnant, no one wants unsolicited advice. But what I was thinking was, sister, hiring a doula to help you walk through the whole birthing process is fantastic. But what you really need is a toddler doula. Someone who, when your kid is about 3 years old and decide that they don't want to take naps anymore, or when they have a major meltdown in the middle of Target, that their sole job is to take your hand and remind you to breathe deeply. Yes, and to convince you that you are going to make it through this in one piece, right? Am I right? I think that should be a profession. So I was on the airplane heading home to Denver after that, and I couldn't help but think about how integral breath is in the whole process of bringing life into being, right? We use breathing techniques to help us through labor. We anxiously await our baby's first breath, their transition that symbols their transition from womb to world. And then even when they are 12 years old, and I know this from experience, we still tiptoe into their rooms at night to watch their sweet faces breathe in and breathe out as they rest. And it got me thinking about this part in the beginning of God's story in the world. And it's a piece of poetry where God crafts this image of how humanity was created. And it says that God took dirt, clay from the ground, and he formed it. And then he breathed into it with his own breath. It was his breath that gave the dirt life. And so essentially, we are holy dirt. Or maybe a better way to say it is holy ground. And I don't know about you, but I don't often feel like I am holy ground. I have said things that I regret. I've hurt people. I yell at my kids for really dumb reasons, and sometimes in the middle of the night, when I'm really tired and our dogs are pawing at the back door to go out, I pretend I'm asleep so that my husband Joe will get up and let them out. Am I the only one who does that? Am I the only horrible person in the world? Okay, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Here's the truth, you guys. I have to remind myself that my mistakes don't scare God. And my mistakes don't disqualify me from the good things that God has for me. Richard Rohr, who's a Franciscan priest and one of my all-time favorite theologians, talks about Native American rugs. And he says that in Native American rug weaving, when a rug is just about finished, they leave some strands of string on the bottom corner of it. It's like strings that you would instinctively feel like you needed to trim off, but they do it for a reason, because they believe it is in the blemish where the Spirit enters. And so apparently Native American rugs and the God of the universe have a lot in common, because we have a God whose Spirit enters through our blemishes in broken places in order to create something beautiful. And so, if you are feeling disappointed by things you have done, if you are feeling worn out by your current circumstances, I have some good news for you. These are the words that God is breathing into our souls this year at MOPS. And it's from Isaiah 43. And he says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." Can you hear the whispers of the new thing that God is breathing into your souls? It's that thing that's like in the very fiber of your being, and you just know that if you don't do it, you'll be violating your very DNA. It seems to me that our entire lives are a pursuit to become the person who God has created us to be. And that pursuit is filled with a lot of brave first steps. And the thing that totally sucks about that is that brave first steps are usually super scary. But I believe that it's possible to be brave and scared at the same time. And with each trembling step that we take forward, we're reminded that God is with us and for us. And the very fact that we are breathing means that we are inhabiting holy ground. So I have this friend named Cindy, and just by chance one night she's at a concert and she sits next to this woman, and they start talking about the weather, and then the conversation about the weather turns into conversations about their families, and then the conversation about their families turns into a conversation about how this woman, who she just met, had cheated on her husband and was now pregnant by a guy who is currently in prison. And in having a conversation with this woman, my friend learns that she is completely alone. Her family has disowned her. She has no friends. And her biggest fear is that she is going to have to go to the hospital and deliver her baby all by herself. And so my friend says, "I'll go with you." And 2 months later, she's at the hospital holding her new friend's hand as she brings her baby into the world to breathe his first breath. Because being brave means showing up. A couple months ago, my husband went to Ecuador with Compassion. And you guys, Compassion is doing such amazing work around the world. But Joe, my husband, went to Quito to visit 3 kids that we sponsor there. And so he visited all of the different centers that Compassion has, and they teach arts and crafts, and they teach the kids computer skills and all of these other amazing things. And another thing that they do is that they provide the kids with a couple of meals a week. And because of the level of poverty around Quito, for most of these kids, the meals that Compassion provides are the only meals that they can count on all week. And so Joe had the privilege of passing out food, lunch to all of the kids at one of these centers. And so they were long tables, and the kids were sitting on either side. And so Joe starts at one end, and he's passing plates to each of them. And in order to get to the end of the table, he has to reach across a couple kids. And so he takes a plate, and he's reaching across, and a little girl, who's about 9 years old, grabs it with both hands. And he's like, oh, honey, I'm passing it out to the end of the table. I'll come back and bring more plates, but let's pass them down. But she holds on to it, and she locks eyes with him. She's desperate. And so he lets go of it, of course. And she takes it, and she turns, and she sets it down next to her little brother who is sitting next to her with the hungriest eyes you have ever seen. Her desperation was on behalf of her little brother because she was determined that he was going to eat that day. Because being brave means making sure that the people around us are fed. In September, some friends and I decided that we were going to host a dinner party. And so we had this idea that we'd have 8 friends over to my house, we'd have dinner, and we'd all pick one brave thing that we were going to focus on over the coming months. And then we'd share it with one another, and we'd celebrate our successes and failures together. So everybody came over, and we had dinner, and we laughed and ate and all of those good things. And then it was time to go around the table and talk about our one brave thing. And so everybody's thing was completely different. One person said that she was going to compete in a triathlon. Another friend said that she was going to find a mentor. Another friend said she was going to write her life story. And then it was Dally's turn. And with trembling hands and flushed cheeks, Dally tells us that her one brave thing is that she's going to stop biting her nails. Right? That is fantastic. What Dally's thing reminded me of is that one person's brave can't be compared to another person's brave. For Dally, telling us about her nails was the equivalent of like running through her college campus naked. Like it was that intimate and vulnerable, right? But we can't measure one person's brave compared to another. It knows no scale. The way we measure it is by our willingness to share our whole selves with the people around us. There's a guy who some people say has the ability to heal. He's Jewish, and he follows all of the Jewish customs. And into this scene comes a woman who's been bleeding for 12 years. And according to Jewish custom, women who are bleeding are considered unclean and untouchable. Can you imagine being untouchable for 12 years? But she has a plan. Because deep in her guts, she feels like maybe if she just can touch this guy, that something will change. But that's risky, because according to Jewish culture, women who are unclean are not allowed to touch anyone else because it will make them unclean. But desperate women do desperate things, and she goes to where she knows Jesus is going to be. And she gets near to him, and she takes a breath. She reaches out her hand and touches the prayer shawl that he's wearing. And do you know what a prayer shawl, a Jewish prayer shawl, looks like? It has a couple strings hanging off the corner of it. It's called a tallis, and the strings are called tzitzi. She touches the corner of his prayer shawl, and the bleeding stops. And Jesus stops. And he turns, and he says, "Who just touched me?" And the entire crowd thinks he's going to reprimand that woman who just touched him and made him unclean. But do you know what he does? He says to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." And the word that Jesus uses for peace is actually shalom. And shalom means the presence of God. It is wholeness and completeness. Her wholeness comes about through her act of courage, because being brave means reaching out for healing. I have a friend named Christina. She lives in San Diego, and 3 years ago, her husband told her that he had a girlfriend. And then he told her that he wanted to be with his girlfriend. And so he left her and their 2 kids, and she had no way to pay their rent or pay for food, and so it ended up that she wasn't eating so that she could feed her kids. And so a bunch of my friends got together, and they decided that they needed to do something about this situation. And so they called her up, and they said, "Hey, can we come over?" And so they go over to her house, and they show up at her door, and they have a huge basket in their arms. And they go inside, and they say, "Christina, It is unacceptable to us that you are having a hard time feeding your family. And so in this basket, you will find everything that you need to take care of your family for an entire year. And she looks through the basket, and there's a receipt saying that her rent had been paid. And there's gift cards for food and gift cards for gas, everything that she could possibly need to care for her family for a year. And because of my friend's generosity, she suddenly felt brave enough to start over. And she and her kids danced for joy in their living room. And she and her kids danced for joy in their living room, because bravery knows no scale. It simply means reaching out for healing and making sure that the people around us are fed. And all we have to do is show up. So my friends, may you relentlessly pursue who God created you to be, a person made of breath and dirt. So breathe deeply and don't look back. New things are springing up. Are you ready to welcome them in? Amen.